The millionaire paid $10,000 to take his employee to the ball, and when she entered, she appeared like a true goddess, illuminating the hall. Conversations ceased, gazes turned, and the shock that followed was something no one was prepared for. Support the channel by leaving your like and comment, and let's get to our story. Ryan held the cream-colored envelope between his fingers, feeling the weight of what it represented. The invitation to the annual gala of Almeida Construction in Oakville was there, printed in golden letters on an ivory background, demanding his presence as the majority partner. He knew he couldn't miss it, but the mere thought of walking through those doors alone, facing curious glances and questions disguised as kindness, made his stomach churn. 2 years had passed since the divorce, and yet the wound remained exposed, throbbing every time someone mentioned Lisa, every time he sensed the awkward silence when her name came up in conversations. He didn't want pity, but that was exactly what he saw reflected in the faces of people, and it ate away at him like rust on forgotten metal. The penthouse was quiet that Thursday afternoon, with the sea breeze from Good Harbor wafting through the open windows, bringing the scent of salt that he usually found comforting. But not today. Today everything felt too heavy, laden with an expectation he didn't know how to fulfill. Ryan dropped the invitation on the coffee table and walked to the balcony, observing the activity on the beach below, people strolling along the shore, living their ordinary lives, oblivious to the complications he had created for himself. Was it really that hard to just move on? Did everyone carry this kind of emptiness, or was he special in this kind of failure? The soft sound of bare feet on the wooden floor pulled him from his thoughts. Mia crossed the room with a basket of clean clothes resting on her hip, her dark hair tied up in a high bun, her face focused as she folded a dress shirt with surgical precision. She had worked there for 3 years, and Ryan could barely remember what the house was like before her. Mia was efficient, discreet, almost invisible in the way she moved through the spaces, anticipating needs before he even realized he had them. She knew he preferred his coffee black, that he hated light, socks with dark suits, that on bad days he wanted nothing but silence. It was as if she read the rooms, interpreted moods without needing words. Ryan watched as she organized the shirts in the bedroom closet, her movements economical and precise. Mia never wasted gestures, never spoke more than necessary, and perhaps that was why he felt comfortable with her presence. There was no judgment in those brown eyes when she found him still in pajamas at noon on weekends. There were no questions when he spent entire nights locked in the office pretending to work. She simply existed in that space, taking care of things he didn't have the energy to manage, maintaining some sort of order in the silent chaos his life had become. It was when Mia passed by the coffee table and her eyes landed on the invitation that Ryan noticed the subtle change in her expression. It wasn't curiosity exactly, but something close to recognition, as if she knew the weight of that golden piece of paper. She said nothing, just continued on her way to the kitchen. But Ryan felt a strange pang in his chest, a kind of embarrassment he couldn't name. It was as if Mia had seen something too intimate, as if that invitation exposed more than it should about his solitude. He returned to the living room, picked up the envelope again, and stood there, feeling the weight of the decision he needed to make. He could make up some excuse, claim a last-minute commitment, issues with a project. His partners would understand, or at least pretend to. But Ryan knew that would only delay the inevitable. At some point, he would have to appear in public again. He would have to face people, show that he was okay, that he had moved on, even if all of that was a lie. Mia's voice came from the kitchen, soft yet clear. Her northeastern accent carried the vowels in a particular way, stretching some syllables almost musically. She was talking on the phone, and although Ryan couldn't distinguish the words, the tone was one of concern. He had heard her speak on the phone before, always in whispers, always with that contained urgency that indicated trouble. Mia never commented on her personal life, never asked for time off beyond what was established, never complained about anything. She simply showed up every morning at 7 on the dot and disappeared at 5 in the afternoon, taking with her any trace of her existence outside those walls. For the first time in 3 years, Ryan wondered about Mia's life, where she lived, who her family was, if she had a boyfriend, dreams beyond folding clothes and organizing closets. The realization of his own ignorance bothered him. He had always prided himself on being a good employer. He paid on time, respected schedules, never demanded anything beyond what was agreed. But was that enough? Did he really see Mia as a person or just as a functional part of his routine? When she returned to the living room, Ryan noticed her eyes were slightly red, as if she had been on the verge of tears, but had held it together. Mia walked past him toward the cleaning cart, but Ryan spoke before he thought. "Are you okay?" The question came out more abruptly than he intended, breaking the silent protocol they had maintained for 3 years. Mia paused, surprised, and took a few seconds to process that he was speaking to her, that he was asking something personal. "Yes, sir. Thank you for asking." The response came automatic, polite, closed off. She didn't want to share, and Ryan felt he had no right to insist, but something had changed in that moment. A tiny door had opened. Ryan could no longer pretend that Mia was just the efficient housekeeper. She was a person with her own problems, with phone calls that made her want to cry, with a whole life happening outside that apartment. And suddenly, looking at her standing there with a cleaning cloth in her hand, Ryan had a completely insane idea. It was impulsive, inappropriate, probably wrong on several levels. But it was also the only solution he could envision for his 2 problems: the gala he needed to attend and the desperate need not to be alone that night. "Mia, I need to talk to you about something." She turned completely, her eyes wide with a mix of apprehension and curiosity. Ryan rarely initiated conversations that weren't about household tasks or specific instructions. "You can sit for a moment," he pointed to the sofa, but Mia hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the suggestion. Sitting in the living room was something she had never done, an invisible line separating employer and employee. "Please," Ryan insisted, and something in his tone made her comply, sitting at the edge of the couch as if ready to get up at any moment. Ryan remained standing, pacing back and forth as he tried to organize his thoughts. How to explain this without sounding completely absurd? How to propose what he was about to propose without her thinking he had lost his mind? He stopped in front of the window, his back to Mia, and began to speak. "You know you've been working here for 3 years. You've always been extremely professional, discreet, efficient. I trust you." Mia didn't respond, just waited, and Ryan could feel her eyes fixed on his back. "I have an obligation in 2 weeks. A gala for the construction company is mandatory for partners." He paused, took a deep breath. "I don't want to go alone." The silence that followed was thick, laden with unspoken implications. Ryan turned to face her, and what he saw on Mia's face was genuine confusion. She didn't understand where he was going with this, and Ryan realized he needed to be more direct. "I'm proposing a purely professional arrangement." He picked up the invitation from the table and showed it to her. "I need you to come with me to this gala as my date. You would be there for approximately 4 hours from start to finish. In exchange, I would pay you $10,000. Mia blinked, processing the words as if they were in another language. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. Ryan continued, feeling the need to fill the silence. "I know it sounds strange, but it's just one night. You wouldn't have to do anything besides being present. Engage in polite conversation if someone speaks to you. Maybe dance. Once or twice. I would cover all costs for the dress, shoes, salon, whatever is necessary. The $10,000 would be just for your presence." Finally, Mia found her voice, but it came out shaky, filled with disbelief. "Mr. Ryan, I don't understand why." It was a legitimate question, and Ryan didn't have an answer that wouldn't make him seem pathetic. "Why are you asking me?" "Because I trust you won't get any ideas. Because I need someone who understands this is just a transaction and nothing more. Because you're the only person I trust enough to do this without complicating things," he finally said, and there was truth in those words. Mia lowered her eyes to her hands, fingers intertwined in her lap. Ryan could see the conflict happening in real time, the gears turning as she weighed the pros and cons of a proposal that was objectively absurd. $10,000. It was more than she earned in 4 months working there. It was enough money to solve serious problems, to change desperate situations. And Ryan knew, from the phone conversation he had overheard earlier, from the redness in her eyes, that Mia had exactly that kind of problem. "Can I think about it?" Her voice came low, almost a whisper. Ryan nodded, relieved that she hadn't refused outright. "Of course, take all the time you need, but I need an answer by tomorrow because if you don't accept, I'll have to find another solution." It was a tight deadline, he knew, but it was also honest. Mia stood up from the couch, still processing, still visibly shocked by what she had just heard. "Thank you for the offer, Mr. Ryan. I will think carefully." She returned to her tasks, but Ryan noticed that her movements were less precise now, more mechanical, as if her body was operating on autopilot, while her mind was somewhere else entirely. Ryan went back to the balcony, watching the sea stretch to the horizon. He had made the proposal, put the idea out into the world, and now all he could do was wait. Part of him hoped Mia would accept because the alternative was facing that gala alone, exposing his loneliness for all to see. But another part, smaller and more honest, wondered if he was making a terrible mistake, if he was crossing a line that shouldn't be crossed, because now that he had really looked at Mia, now that he had seen her as a person and not as an employee, Ryan realized something disturbing. She was not invisible. She never had been. He had just chosen not to see. And now that he did, he couldn't look away. And this, in some way he still didn't fully understand, changed everything. Mia couldn't sleep that night. Lying on the thin mattress of the room she shared with her cousin, she stared at the cracked ceiling while her mind spun in endless circles. $10,000, the number pulsed in her head like a racing heart, filling every thought, every breath. It was enough money to pay the 3 months of overdue rent for the house in the countryside, cover the debts that had piled up since her father got sick, and still leave a little for medicine. It was the difference between keeping the only place her family knew as home and watching everything crumble. But accepting that proposal meant stepping into unknown territory, crossing a boundary she had carefully learned to respect. Beside her, Lisa snored softly, oblivious to the storm brewing in her cousin's mind. Mia envied that ability to simply switch off, to sleep even when the world seemed to be crumbling. She carefully got up so as not to wake her and walked to the small balcony overlooking the alley. The air was heavy, laden with the typical humidity of Miami, and Mia could hear the distant sound of a party happening a few blocks down. Salsa music spilled from speakers, laughter echoed in the early morning, and she wondered how it was possible that other people's lives continued normally while hers seemed to have turned upside down. 4 hours. That was all Ryan was asking for. 4 hours dressed as someone else, pretending to be someone who belonged to that world of crystal chandeliers and Persian rugs. Mia had seen the photos from previous events in magazines she sometimes flipped through in the penthouse while waiting for the washing machine to finish its cycle. Stunning women in dresses that cost more than she earned in a year. Men in tuxedos discussing million-dollar deals as if they were talking about the weather, and how could she, a girl from the countryside who barely finished high school, mingle among those people without feeling completely out of place? But then Mia thought of her mother's face during their last call, her tired voice saying the bank was threatening to take the house. She thought of her bedridden father, the medications they needed to buy but never had enough money for. She thought about how she had come to Miami 5 years ago, with the promise of sending money every month, of being the family's salvation, and how she was failing miserably at that mission. $10,000 was not just money, it was time, it was dignity, it was the chance to finally breathe without feeling the weight of guilt crushing her chest. When the sun began to lighten the horizon, Mia had already made her decision. She would take a shower, put on the clean uniform she had ironed the night before, catch 2 buses to South Beach, and say yes, because she had no choice, because pride didn't pay bills, because sometimes life pushed you to places you never imagined you would go. And all that was left was to move forward and hope to come out unscathed on the other side. Ryan was on the balcony when she arrived, still in his robe, a steaming cup of coffee in his hands. He hadn't slept well either. She noticed the deep circles under his eyes, the way his shoulders seemed to carry an invisible weight. When Mia entered the living room and placed her bag on the hook behind the door, Ryan turned, and their eyes met. He said nothing, just waited. And Mia understood that this was the moment. There was no way to delay any longer. There was no way to pretend that the conversation from the previous day hadn't happened. "I accept." The words came out firm, firmer than Mia expected. Ryan blinked, surprised, perhaps by the quickness of her response, by the absence of hesitation in her voice. He set the cup down on the side table and walked over to where she was, keeping a respectful distance, yet still closer than they usually were. "Are you sure?" The question came softly, almost kindly, and Mia felt it. "Yes, but I need to make a few things clear." Ryan raised an eyebrow, indicating he was listening. "This is a job, a professional agreement, nothing more." She kept her eyes fixed on his, needing it to be absolutely clear. "I completely agree," Ryan replied without hesitation. "That's exactly how I see it too." Mia felt a strange relief with the confirmation. Part of her feared there might be some hidden expectation, some insinuation that she would have to give later. But Ryan's expression was sincere, almost relieved as well, as if he were grateful for her to establish those boundaries. "So we'll need to plan," he continued, grabbing a notepad from the table. "The charity ball is in 12 days. We'll need to find a dress, book a salon, maybe rehearse some dance steps." Mia felt her stomach churn at the mention of dancing, but she kept her expression neutral. "I can't dance," she admitted. Ryan shrugged. "I'm not exactly Gene Kelly either. If we need to, we can hire someone for some basic lessons. Nothing too elaborate." They spent the next morning organizing the practical details. Ryan called a personal stylist he knew, scheduled an appointment at a high-end boutique in South Beach for the following day. Mia listened to everything with a growing sense of unreality, as if she were watching someone else's life. When Ryan hung up the phone and announced that on Saturday morning they would be choosing the dress, she just felt it. Unable to fully process what was happening, she, Mia Santos, born in a town of 3,000 people in the interior of Florida, was going to a high-end boutique to choose a dress for a charity ball. It was so absurd that it almost made her want to laugh. In the days that followed, the dynamic between them changed subtly but noticeably. Ryan began to talk more, sharing little details about the event, about the people who would be there. "My partner, Frank, is married to Bella. She's the type who loves gossip, so be prepared for personal questions disguised as genuine interest." Mia absorbed everything, mentally picturing faces and names, preparing herself as if studying for an important exam. Ryan seemed to appreciate her dedication, the seriousness with which she approached the agreement. "You're taking this more seriously than I imagined," he commented one afternoon, watching her jot down details in a small notebook. $10,000 is a lot of money. Mia simply replied, "I want to earn it." On Saturday, when they entered the boutique with its gleaming windows and elegant mannequins, Mia felt the urge to run back to the car. Everything there screamed wealth, from the perfume. Mia took a deep breath, the scent of luxury permeating the air, even down to the plush carpet beneath her feet. The saleswoman, a tall woman with platinum hair, assessed Mia from head to toe with a look that bordered on disdain. "Can we help you?" The tone made it clear that she doubted they could afford anything inside. Ryan stepped forward, his voice adopting that authoritative tone Mia recognized from business calls. "We have an appointment with Susana Almeida." The saleswoman's posture changed instantly. Disdain was replaced by a professional smile, overly polite to be genuine. "Of course, Mr. Almeida. Susana is already waiting in the VIP room." They were guided down a hallway to a private room where a middle-aged woman, elegant and warm-smiling, awaited them. "Ryan, darling, it's been too long." Susana greeted him with kisses on the cheek before turning her attention to Mia. "And you must be the special guest. It's a pleasure." There was no judgment in her voice, just gentle curiosity. Mia felt her shoulders relax a bit. What followed was a surreal experience. Susana brought dress after dress, each more stunning than the last. Mia tried on deep blues, vibrant reds, classic blacks. Each time she stepped out of the fitting room, she found Ryan sitting in a velvet chair, watching intently. He dismissed some with a simple nod. He asked to see others from different angles. He wasn't invasive, but he also wasn't indifferent. Mia didn't quite know how to feel about that attention. It was when she put on the last dress that something changed. The dress was a soft gold, almost champagne, with a flowing fit that accentuated her silhouette without being vulgar. The thin straps left her shoulders bare, and the fabric seemed to capture the light almost magically. Mia looked at her reflection in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. This wasn't the housekeeper with her hair tied back and calloused hands. This was someone who could belong to that world of crystal and silk. When she stepped out of the fitting room, Ryan was distractedly fiddling with his phone, but when he looked up and saw her, he froze. The phone nearly slipped from his hand, and for a moment too long to be comfortable. He just stood there staring at her with an expression Mia couldn't decipher. It wasn't the clinical gaze from before, assessing whether the dress fit or not. It was something different, deeper, almost vulnerable. "That one," he finally said, his voice coming out rougher than usual. "Definitely that one." Susana smiled, satisfied. "I knew this would be perfect. You two make a stunning couple." The word couple hung in the air. Mia opened her mouth to correct her, to clarify that they weren't a couple, that this was just business. But Ryan spoke first. "Thank you, Susana. We'll take this." He didn't correct her, didn't explain, and Mia didn't know if that bothered or relieved her. Maybe it was easier to let people think what they wanted. Perhaps it was less complicated than explaining the truth. As they returned to the car, Mia carrying the giant bag with the dress wrapped in tissue paper, Ryan was strangely silent. She glanced at him sideways, noticing the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers drummed on the steering wheel. Something had changed in that boutique. Some invisible line had been crossed. Mia felt a flutter in her stomach, a sense of apprehension she couldn't name. She had accepted this arrangement thinking it would be simple, straightforward, transactional. But now, looking at Ryan driving in silence beside her, Mia began to realize that she might have underestimated how much 4 hours could change everything. And the scariest part was that they hadn't even arrived at the charity ball yet. Mia was in the kitchen preparing lunch when the phone rang. She recognized the number even before answering, and her stomach tightened as it always did when she saw those digits on the screen. It was Joanna, her older sister, and calls from Joanna never brought good news. Mia wiped her hands on her apron and answered, stepping away to the service corridor, where her voice wouldn't reach the room where Ryan was working. "Hello?" Her voice came out cautiously, bracing for the worst. "Mia, thank God you answered." Joanna's voice was tense, laden with that exhaustion that came from sleepless nights and worries that never ceased. "What happened?" Mia asked, though part of her didn't want to know. "Dad's condition worsened. The fever hasn't gone down for 2 days, and the doctor said he needs tests that the clinic won't provide. He has to go to Orlando, and you know we can't afford transportation, let alone the tests." Mia closed, her eyes pressing her forehead against the cold wall. Always the same story, always the same feeling of drowning in problems she couldn't solve quickly enough. "How much?" she asked, even though she knew any amount would be too much for what she had in her account. 300 just for transportation, round trip. The tests the doctor estimated at about 500. "Mia, I don't know what else to do. Mom cries every day and I—" Joanna's voice faltered, and Mia heard the muffled sob from the other end. Her sister, who had always been the strong one, the one holding the family together while Mia was away, trying to earn enough money to help, was crumbling. "I'll figure something out," Mia said, trying to inject a conviction she didn't feel into her voice. "I swear I'll find a way. Just hold on a little longer." When she hung up, Mia stood there in the corridor, her legs trembling, her chest too tight to breathe properly. $800. It was almost her entire salary for the month, and she still had rent to pay, food, bus fare. It just wasn't possible. And it was at that moment that the reality of her arrangement with Ryan materialized in a concrete way. $10,000. In less than 2 weeks, Mia would have $10,000. She could pay for her father's tests, settle the house debts, buy the medications, and still have money left for future emergencies. Those 4 hours at the charity ball were literally the difference between seeing her father have a chance for proper treatment or watching him wither away because there wasn't enough money. Mia returned to the kitchen and finished preparing lunch on autopilot, her thoughts distant, revolving around the family she barely saw but carried on her shoulders every day. She was 19 when she came to Miami, filled with foolish dreams of going to college and building a better life. But reality set in quickly, and dreams were replaced by double shifts, microscopic savings, and desperate phone calls that always asked for more than she had to give. Mia didn't exactly regret it, but sometimes, in moments like this, she wondered what it would be like to have a life that was just hers, where choices didn't always depend on what her family needed. Ryan appeared in the kitchen shortly after noon, as he always did, drawn by the smell of food. Mia had prepared the rice and beans the way he liked it, with plenty of cheese and a touch of fresh cilantro. It was one of the few things from the Northeast that Ryan enjoyed without reservations, and Mia had learned to make it just as her mother had taught her. "It looks great," Ryan commented, serving himself generously. It was only when he was already sitting at the table that he noticed Mia's face. Did something happen? Mia hesitated. They had established clear boundaries, professionalism above all, but maybe that was exactly why she felt and could be honest. "My father is sick. He needs tests that we can't afford." The words came out simple, direct, without drama. Ryan stopped eating, his fork suspended in the air. "I'm sorry. Is it serious?" Mia shrugged, trying to appear more unconcerned than she was. "I don't know yet. That's why we need the tests." Ryan was silent for a moment, as if weighing something. "I can advance part of the payment if it helps. You don't need to wait until after the ball." The offer caught Mia completely by surprise. She had expected polite sympathy, maybe vague advice about seeking help somewhere, But not this, not a practical and immediate solution. I can't accept, she said automatically, although every fibre of her being screamed to say yes. Why not? Ryan asked, genuinely confused. You're going to work. You're going to earn the money. I'm just advancing. Mia shook her head. What if something happens? What if I can't go to the ball? What if I get sick? If there's an emergency, I would owe you. Ryan stared at her for a long moment, and there was something new in that look, something Mia couldn't identify. Mia, I trust. You, if you need the money now, you can take it. It was the second time in a few days that he used that word, trust, as if it were that simple, as if trust was something given easily, without fear of consequences. Mia didn't know how to live in a world where things were easy, where problems could be solved with an advance, where people simply helped because they could. Thank you, she finally said, her voice choked. But I'll wait. My sister will manage for now. It was a lie, but it was a necessary lie. Mia needed to maintain some control, some dignity. If she started accepting advances, favors, kindnesses that weren't strictly part of the agreement, the line between boss and employee would blur even more than it already was. That night, Mia called Joanna and lied, saying she had borrowed money from her cousin. She said to take her father for the tests, that she would send everything through the bank the following week. Joanna cried with relief on the other end of the line, and Mia felt a knot in her throat hearing the desperate gratitude in her sister's voice. You are our salvation. Mia, I don't know what we would do without you. The words should have brought comfort, but they only made the weight on Mia's shoulders increase. Being someone's salvation was too great a responsibility, especially when she was just trying not to drown herself. The days leading up to the ball became a strange countdown. Ryan started arriving home earlier from work, and Mia noticed that he was making excuses to be in the kitchen while she prepared dinner. He talked about his day, about tedious meetings and difficult clients, and Mia found herself responding, sharing little stories about the market where she bought the ingredients, about the lady who sold fresh herbs and always gave her an extra sprig of mint. They were mundane, superficial conversations, but there was a growing intimacy in those moments that Mia didn't quite know how to handle. One afternoon, while ironing Ryan's shirts, she noticed a framed photo she had never seen before. It was on the top shelf of the bookcase, almost hidden behind architecture books. Mia shouldn't have taken it. She should have respected his privacy, but her curiosity got the better of her. In the photo, Ryan looked younger, perhaps. 5 years ago, smiling in a way Mia had never seen him smile. Beside him was a beautiful blonde woman with light eyes, almost artificially stunning, clinging to his arm with obvious possessiveness. Mia didn't need to ask to know who she was. Lisa, the ex-wife, the reason Ryan avoided social events, the wound that had yet to heal. Can you put that back? Ryan's voice came from the door, making Mia jump in surprise. She hadn't heard him arrive, and now he was standing there in the doorway with an unreadable expression. Mia quickly returned the photo to the shelf, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have touched it. Ryan entered the room, took the photo and looked at it for a moment before putting it away in the desk drawer. It was a long time ago, he said, more to himself than to her. It was more about herself than about Mia. It seemed like it would last forever, but it turned out to be just a chapter. Mia didn't know what to say, so she remained silent, waiting. Ryan sat in the leather chair, rubbing his face with his hands. She cheated on me. With my best friend. Cliché, isn't it? I found out in the worst possible way, coming back early from a trip and finding them in my own bed. He laughed, but there was no humor in that sound, only bitterness. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was realizing that I probably already knew deep down, but it was easier to pretend everything was fine than to face the truth. Mia felt her chest tighten with the raw pain in his voice. She recognized that kind of pretense, that ability to look at one's own disaster and decide to ignore it because the alternative was to crumble. "Why are you telling me this?" Mia asked softly. Ryan looked up at her, and there was a vulnerability there that Mia hadn't expected. "Because you asked me why I chose you to go with me to the charity ball. And I think the real answer is that you're the only person who doesn't look at me with pity. You don't know the details of my life. You're not part of the social circles where everyone knows everyone and pretends not to know about their failures." He paused. "With you, I can just be Ryan, not the poor guy who was cheated on, not the successful partner who needs to maintain appearances. Just me." Mia then understood the weight of what he was saying. It wasn't about having a date for the ball. It was about having someone who didn't judge him, who didn't carry prejudices about who he was or should be, and in a way, it was the same for her. With Ryan, Mia didn't have to be the family savior, the daughter who carried everyone's weight on her shoulders. She could just be Mia, the woman who loved to cook and read cheap romances in her spare time, who dreamed of small things, like having a kitchen of her own one day. "I understand," she finally said. And there was absolute truth in those two words. Ryan smiled, that small, genuine smile that Mia was starting to recognize as rare. "I know you do. That's why I trust you." And there was that word again, hanging between them like a promise or perhaps an omen. Trust, the most dangerous thing to give and receive, because once established, there was no going back and pretending it was just a business arrangement. They had crossed some invisible line, and both knew it, even if neither was ready to admit it out loud. The next morning, Mia woke up with the strange feeling that something fundamental had changed. She couldn't quite name what it was, but it felt like the air in the apartment was different, charged with an expectation that hadn't existed before. She made coffee as she always did, grinding the beans just the way Ryan preferred, setting aside the still warm French bread she had bought from the corner bakery. But when he appeared in the kitchen, barefoot and with his hair still tousled from sleep, Mia felt her stomach knot inexplicably. It was Ryan, the same Ryan as always. So why was she suddenly noticing details she had never paid attention to? The way he rubbed his eyes before taking the first sip of coffee, the small scar on his left eyebrow, the way his shoulders relaxed when he sat at the table. "Good morning," he said, and his voice was softer than usual, almost shy. Mia responded with a nod, not trusting her own voice. The conversation from the day before still echoed in her mind, Ryan's words about needing someone who saw him just as he was, without judgments or expectations. It was a lot of responsibility. Mia thought as she spread butter on the bread. Being the person someone truly trusts, being the safe harbor where someone can be vulnerable. She wasn't sure if she was ready for that, especially considering that in just over a week, everything would end. The ball would happen, she would receive the money, and life would return to normal. Ryan would continue to be her boss, she would continue to be his housekeeper, and that strange moment of intimacy would just be an awkward memory that they would both pretend hadn't happened. But something deep in Mia's chest ached at that prospect, a pang she refused to examine too closely. It was too dangerous. It would let slip truths she wasn't prepared to face. So, Mia did what she always did when things got too complicated. She dove into work, cleaning the house with more vigor than necessary, organizing closets that were already perfectly organized, changing the bed linens even though it wasn't laundry day, keeping herself busy, keeping her hands moving, because busy hands meant a busy mind, and a busy mind had no time to think about impossible things. Ryan left for the office shortly after coffee, but returned in the afternoon, bringing a bag that he set down on the sofa. "For you," he said simply. And when Mia looked inside, she found shoes. They were medium-heeled gold to match the dress, delicate, but not over the top. Mia picked one up, feeling the weight of the soft leather, the subtle shine in the light. "You didn't have to." She started, but Ryan interrupted her. "I need you to be comfortable. It's going to be a long night." There was something more in those words, a concern that went beyond the practical. Ryan was genuinely worried about her well-being. And that was new territory for Mia. She was used to taking care of others, not being taken care of. "Thank you," she said, and this time she allowed gratitude to show in her voice. Ryan shrugged, as if it were no big deal, but Mia saw the slight blush on his cheeks before she turned and disappeared into the office. Mia stood there with the shoe in her hand, trying to understand the whirlwind of emotions raging inside her. This wasn't normal. Employers didn't buy shoes for their employees with such care. They didn't blush with simple gratitude, and employees definitely shouldn't feel butterflies in their stomachs over such small gestures. That night, Mia tried on the shoes at home, walking around the small room she shared with Cider, testing her balance. She wasn't used to heels. She spent her days in sneakers or flip-flops, and the sensation of being a few inches taller was strangely liberating. "What's all this for?" Cider asked from her bed, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. Mia had mentioned the charity ball, but left out the more complicated details. She reduced everything to a well-paying job opportunity. "I just want to be prepared," Mia replied, practicing a pose she had seen in magazines, one hand on her hip, chin slightly raised. Cider laughed, throwing a pillow at her. "You're different. Is there something you're not telling me?" Mia sat on the bed next to her cousin, carefully taking off the shoes. "It's just a job, Cider, nothing more." But even as she said that, Mia knew it was a lie. There was something happening, something she couldn't or didn't want to name. Maybe it was just the excitement of doing something different, of breaking free from the routine that had become so predictable. Or maybe it was something deeper, more dangerous. Cider studied her for a long moment, as if she could read the thoughts Mia was trying so hard to hide. "Just be careful, okay? This world isn't ours. It's easy to get lost when you enter places that weren't made for people like us." Her cousin's words echoed in Mia's mind as she tried to sleep. Cider was right. Of course, that world of designer dresses and charity balls wasn't hers. It was temporary, a fantasy that would last only a few hours before Mia returned to her reality of crowded buses and tight budgets. But what if just for one night she could pretend? What if she could believe she belonged there, that she deserved to be next to Ryan, not as a hired help, but as someone of value? The idea was both thrilling and terrifying, and Mia didn't know which of those feelings should prevail. The next few days passed in a strange haze. Ryan hired a dance instructor who came to the penthouse 3 times to teach them the basic steps of the waltz. Mia felt ridiculous at first, stepping on her own feet, too stiff, overthinking every move. But Ryan was just as clumsy as she was, laughing at his own mishaps in a way Mia had never seen him laugh before. The instructor, an elegant lady named Eloise, was patient but firm. "You need to look at each other," she instructed, positioning Mia's hand on Ryan's shoulder. "Dancing is about connection. It doesn't matter if you know the steps. What matters is if you can move together." Move together. Mia repeated those words in her mind as she tried to follow Ryan's lead. He was surprisingly gentle, his hand firm yet not controlling on her back, guiding her with small touches that Mia felt through the fabric of her blouse. When their eyes met, Mia saw there the same vulnerability she had noticed the day he spoke about Lisa. It was as if, in those moments, awkwardly dancing around the room while Eloise corrected their postures, they were shedding all the layers of protection they usually maintained. They weren't an employer and employee, they were just 2 people trying to figure out how to move together without stumbling. After the 3rd lesson, Eloise declared they were ready enough. "You're not going to win any competitions," she said with a smile, "but you'll manage to navigate the ballroom without a disaster." When she left, Ryan poured 2 glasses of wine, offering one to Mia. She hesitated for just a second before accepting. They sat on the balcony, watching the sun set over the ocean, and for the first time, Mia allowed herself to relax completely in his presence. The wine was good, smooth yet full-bodied, and Mia felt warmth spreading through her body, dissolving the last resistances she still held up. "Are you scared?" Ryan asked suddenly, his voice low, almost hesitant. Mia thought before answering because she knew this was one of those questions that required honesty. "Yes," she admitted. "I'm afraid of doing something wrong, of embarrassing you, of not knowing how to behave." She paused, gathering courage for the rest. "And I'm afraid of liking it too much, of getting used to something that isn't real, that will end." Ryan was silent for so long that Mia thought she might have said too much, that she had crossed some line she shouldn't have. But then he spoke, and his voice was heavy with an emotion Mia couldn't fully identify. "I'm scared of that too, of getting used to having you around in a way that isn't just professional, of starting to look forward to moments like this, where I can just be myself without masks or pretenses." He turned to face her, and there was something in his eyes that made Mia's heart race. "You remind me that there's more to life than contracts and meetings. You make me want things I thought I didn't want anymore." The confession hung between them, heavy and vulnerable, and Mia didn't know what to do with it. Part of her wanted to get up, put physical distance between them, remind Ryan of the boundaries they had established. But another part, larger and more insistent, wanted to stay exactly where she was, wanted to hear more, wanted to understand what those words meant. "Ryan," she began, but didn't know how to finish the sentence. He shook his head, as if he understood. "Sorry, I shouldn't have said anything. It's the wine, the fatigue." But both knew it wasn't just that. It was something real, palpable, growing. Between them, like a plant that no one had planted, yet it insisted on sprouting. Still, Mia finished her wine in a long gulp, needing the liquid courage to say what needed to be said. "Don't apologize. Let's just be careful, okay? None of us can afford to complicate things." Ryan felt her, but there was a sadness in his eyes that mirrored exactly what Mia felt inside. They were being careful, being responsible, doing what was right. So why did it feel so wrong? The following week dragged on and flew by at the same time. There were only 4 days left until the charity ball, when Mia went to the salon that Ryan had booked. She was pampered in ways she had never experienced before. Her nails done with the most expensive understated polish, her hair cut and treated until it shone, eyebrows shaped by skilled hands. When she looked in the mirror at the end, Mia barely recognized the woman looking back. She was still herself. But there was something different, a newfound confidence in her posture, a sparkle in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Maybe Lisa was wrong. Maybe that world could be hers, even if just for one night. And maybe, just maybe, what was growing between her and Ryan didn't have to end when the clock struck midnight. The doorbell rang on a Friday afternoon, 2 days before the charity ball. Mia was in the laundry room organizing towels when she heard the sound echo through the apartment. Ryan was in the office on an important video call, and she knew he hated being interrupted during those moments. Quickly drying her hands on her apron, Mia went to the door, expecting to find some delivery person, or perhaps the doorman with some mail. What she didn't expect was the woman standing on the other side of the door, tall and blonde, dressed with a casual elegance that cost more than Mia earned in 6 months. The visitor had piercing blue eyes that assessed her from head to toe in less than 2 seconds. The judgment in that gaze was instant and devastating. "Who are you?" The question came straight. Without preamble or basic courtesy, Mia felt her stomach churn, but she maintained her composure. I work here. Can I help you? The woman laughed, but there was no humor in that sound, only scorn. You work here? How convenient. She pushed the door with more force than necessary, entering uninvited. Mia had to step back to avoid being knocked over. Where's Ryan? Mia didn't need to ask who that woman was. She would recognize that face anywhere, even years older, with a few expression lines that weren't in the photo she had seen in the office. Lisa, the ex-wife, the person who had broken Ryan in ways he was still trying to rebuild. He's busy at the moment. Can I let him know you're here? Mia kept her voice professional, but her hands trembled slightly at her side. Lisa walked through the room as if she still owned that space, touching objects, assessing changes. You, she repeated sarcastically, such formality. Ryan must be paying you well for you to be so proper. The insinuation was clear, and Mia felt the blood rush to her face. Before she could respond, Ryan's voice cut through the air. What are you doing here, Lisa? He stood at the entrance of the hallway, his face a mask of restraint. But Mia could see the tension in every line of his body. Lisa turned, and her face transformed completely. The scorn gave way to a soft, almost sweet expression that Mia recognized as deeply false. Hi, love. Long time no see. She took a few steps toward Ryan, but he remained where he was, not moving to greet her. You didn't answer my question. What are you doing here? Ryan's voice was harsh, leaving no room for intimacy. Lisa pouted slightly, as if hurt. Can't I visit my ex-husband? I heard you're going to the contractors' charity ball this year. I was surprised. You've been so reclusive since the divorce. Mia felt she should leave. Let them be alone, but her feet felt glued to the floor. There was something in the dynamic between the two that kept her there, a mix of fascination and horror, like watching a car crash in slow motion. Ryan finally moved, but it was to stand next to Mia, not to approach Lisa. The gesture did not go unnoticed. Lisa's eyes narrowed, turning to Mia with renewed and much more dangerous interest. So it's true, you're bringing someone? She laughed, but there was a contained hysteria in that sound, as she chose to refer to Mia as the housekeeper. How poetic. Ryan, I always knew you had a hidden rebellious side. Mia, can you give us a moment? Ryan spoke without taking his eyes off Lisa, but his hand briefly touched Mia's elbow, a nearly imperceptible gesture of support, or perhaps an apology. Mia nodded and retreated to the kitchen, but she couldn't help but overhear the conversation that followed. The voices were muffled, but the tone was unmistakable. Lisa was furious, her voice rising and falling in waves of indignation while Ryan remained firm, each word coming out controlled but sharp as glass. You can't do this to me. Showing up at the ball with her, after everything we've been through together. Lisa's voice was laden with an emotion Mia couldn't identify as either anger or despair. I'm not doing anything with you, Lisa. You lost the right to comment on my life the day you decided to cheat on me in our own home. Ryan's voice was low but firm, each word chosen with surgical precision. And don't involve Mia in this. She has nothing to do with what happened between us. There was a tense silence, then the sound of something being thrown, perhaps a pillow. Mia leaned against the kitchen wall, her chest tight, Lisa's words echoing all her insecurities. It was exactly what she had thought, what Saida had warned her about. Different worlds. It didn't matter how she felt, it didn't matter the moments of connection she had shared with Ryan. The reality was inescapable. She was the housekeeper, he was the millionaire boss, and the chasm between those two places couldn't be crossed by pretty dresses or dance lessons. My life is no longer your concern, Ryan said, and Mia heard footsteps approaching the door. I want you to leave and not come back. We have nothing more to discuss. Are you going to regret this? Lisa's voice was laced with venom. When she disappoints you, when you realize she's just using you for your money, you'll remember that I warned you. The door slammed shut, and Mia heard the sound of Lisa's heels marching down the hallway to the elevator. The silence that followed was thick, heavy with all the unspoken things. Mia remained in the kitchen, her hands gripping the edge of the sink, trying to process what had just happened. When she finally gathered the courage to return to the living room, she found Ryan standing on the balcony, his hands resting on the railing, his shoulders tense. "I'm sorry," he said without turning. "You shouldn't have been exposed to that." Mia approached slowly, keeping a respectful distance. It wasn't her fault. She showed up unannounced. Ryan laughed bitterly. That's her specialty, showing up when least expected and destroying any moment of peace I've managed to build. He finally turned to look at her, and Mia saw the exhaustion on his face, as if that 10-minute visit had drained all his energy. "What did she say about you using me for? Money? You know I don't think that, right, Mia?" He wanted to say he knew, wanted to comfort him, but Lisa's words had planted a seed of doubt that she couldn't ignore. It wasn't exactly about the money, but there was truth in that accusation. Their arrangement was transactional. It had started as a business deal, and although it had evolved into something more complex, the foundation remained the same. Mia was there because she needed the $10,000, because her family depended on that money. Without it, she would never have accepted to go to the charity ball, never would have crossed that line. "I know," she finally said, but her voice didn't come out as convincingly as she would have liked. Ryan noticed. Of course, he noticed. He read people with the same ease he read architectural plans. "Mia, look at me." She obeyed, forcing herself to maintain eye contact. "I don't care what Lisa or anyone else thinks. I know what this is. I know what you are." He paused, searching for the right words. "You are honest. You are the most genuine person I've known in years, and if there's anything transactional in our arrangement, it's my fault for structuring things this way from the start, but what's happening between us has nothing to do with money or agreements." Mia felt tears prick at her eyes and blinked quickly to push them away. "I don't know what's happening between us," she admitted quietly, "and that scares me." Ryan stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "It scares me too, because I know that when this is over, when the charity ball ends and you receive your payment, we will have to decide what to do with all of this." He gestured vaguely between them, as if he could point to the invisible feelings growing in the space that separated them. "And I don't know what the right answer is. I just know I don't want it to end." The confession hung in the air, vulnerable and raw. Mia felt her heart race, blood pulsing in her ears. It was the closest thing to a declaration Ryan had made, and she didn't know whether to run away or move even closer. "Ryan, this is crazy," she said, but her voice was weak, lacking conviction. "Lisa is right about one thing. We are from different worlds. I clean your house, I cook your food. How could there be anything real between us when the foundation is so unequal?" Ryan shook his head vehemently. "This is what we do for a living, not who we are. You are not just the person who cleans my house. You are intelligent, observant, and have a strength I don't see in anyone in my social circle. And I am not just the rich guy who pays you. At least I hope I'm not just that." There was an insecurity in his voice that Mia had never heard before. A need for validation that touched her deeply. "You are not just that," she said softly. It was true. Ryan had become so much more than her boss in the past weeks. He was the person with whom she shared comfortable silences over morning coffee. He was the one who made bad jokes to try to make her laugh when he noticed she was worried. He was the one who truly saw her, not as a function, but as a person. But that didn't change the fact that it was complicated, very complicated. Ryan nodded slowly. I know, and I'm not asking you to figure this out right now. I'm just saying that when we get to the other side of the charity ball, when there are no more agreements or obligations between us, I would like to have the chance to figure out what this could be. Mia closed her eyes, trying to organize the chaos of emotions swirling inside her. It was all so intense, happening too fast. A few weeks ago, her life was simple, predictable, safe in its monotony. Now she was in the midst of a whirlwind that threatened to sweep away everything she knew. Let's just focus on the charity ball, she finally said, opening her eyes to find Ryan still looking at her with that intensity that made her stomach churn. We'll think about the future later. It wasn't exactly a promise, but it wasn't a rejection either. Ryan seemed to accept that as enough for now. He smiled, small and sad, yet genuine. Deal, he said, extending his hand formally, as if they were closing a business deal. Mia looked at that hand, knowing it was more than just a simple handshake. It was an acknowledgement that something had changed irreversibly between them. When their fingers touched, Mia felt an electric current surge up her arm, and by the way Ryan's eyes widened slightly, he felt it too. They stood there, hands still joined, looking at each other. And Mia thought that perhaps this was the most terrifying and exhilarating moment of her life, because for the first time she was allowing herself to want something that wasn't practical, that didn't solve problems, that didn't help anyone but herself. And that freedom was both liberating and terrifying. The night of the charity ball arrived like an inevitable storm. Mia woke up with her heart racing, her hands trembling as she showered and tried to calm the nerves threatening to consume her. Ryan had insisted that she get ready at his penthouse, saying it would be more practical, and Mia didn't have the courage to refuse. When she arrived, he was already ready, impeccable in a black tuxedo, his hair slicked back in a way that made him look like he stepped out of a magazine. Their eyes met across the room, and Mia saw the same nervousness she felt, the same anticipation mixed with fear. She locked herself in the guest room to get dressed, her hands shaking so much that it took her 3 tries to zip up the golden dress. When she was finally ready, Mia looked at herself in the mirror and had to catch her breath. The woman reflected there was not the girl from the countryside who cleaned houses to survive. She was someone strong, beautiful, deserving of being anywhere she chose. Mia held that image in her mind, needing to believe in it at least for one night. When she opened the door and stepped out, Ryan was waiting in the living room. His reaction was immediate and devastating. He froze, the glass he was holding nearly slipping from his hands, his lips parting slightly, but no sound came out. Mia descended the 3 steps separating the hallway from the living room, each step measured in her golden heels. And when she finally stopped in front of him, Ryan still hadn't moved. "You look beautiful," he finally said, his voice hoarse, laden with an emotion that went far beyond simple admiration. "No, you are absolutely stunning." Mia felt the heat rise to her face, but forced herself to maintain eye contact. "You look very handsome too." The words felt inadequate to describe how Ryan looked at that moment, but they were the only ones she could form. He finally moved, closing the distance between them, and Mia noticed he was holding a small velvet box. "I know this isn't part of the deal," Ryan began, opening the box to reveal a delicate gold necklace with a star-shaped pendant. "But I thought it would match your dress. May I?" Mia simply nodded, unable to speak through the knot in her throat. Ryan positioned himself behind her, and Mia felt his fingers brush her nape as he fastened the necklace. The touch was brief but burned her skin like fire, and when she turned to thank him, she found Ryan so close that she could feel his breath, see the tiny golden flecks in his brown eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. and for an endless moment it seemed he would lean in, crossing that last distance between them, but Ryan stepped back, offering his arm formally. "Let's go." The ballroom where the charity ball was held was even more impressive than Mia had imagined. Gigantic chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, casting golden light over the guests circulating in evening gowns and impeccable tuxedos. Mia held onto Ryan's arm tighter than she intended, and he covered her hand with his in a comforting gesture. "Breathe," he murmured close to her ear. "You belong here as much as anyone in this room." Mia wanted to believe those words, but when she saw the looks turning towards them, some curious, others clearly surprised, her confidence wavered. It was Frank, Ryan's business partner, who approached first, his wife Bella by his side, wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ryan, what a surprise to see you here and with company." The tone was friendly, but there was an unspoken question hanging in the air. Ryan introduced Mia with impressive ease, his hand firm on her back. And while Bella asked subtly invasive questions about how they met, Ryan deflected them all with grace and firmness. Mia then realized he was protecting her, creating a shield between her and the voracious curiosity. The night progressed in a blur of superficial conversations and polite smiles. Mia found she could handle it better than she expected, answering questions honestly but without exposing too much. When someone asked what she did, she simply said she worked in domestic management, and the vagueness of the answer seemed to satisfy most. But it was when the music started that everything changed. Ryan led her to the dance floor, and suddenly their bodies were close, moving to the rhythm of the waltz they had practiced so hard. "You're doing perfectly," Ryan murmured as they twirled around the floor. Mia laughed, nervous but genuine. "I'm trying not to step on your feet." But the truth was that dancing with Ryan felt natural in a way she hadn't expected, as if their bodies instinctively knew how to move together. It was during the third song that Mia saw Lisa standing at the edge of the floor, watching them with an expression that mixed anger and something that felt dangerously close to regret. Mia tensed, but Ryan followed her line of sight and gently squeezed her waist. "Don't look at her. Look at me." Mia obeyed, turning her focus back to Ryan. And what she saw there took her breath away. It wasn't the polite gaze of a boss towards his housekeeper. It wasn't the gratitude of someone being helped with a favor. It was something deep and frightening. It was desire and tenderness, intertwined. It was the expression of someone who was seeing the most important person in the world, Mia. Ryan said her name like a prayer, and suddenly nothing else mattered. It didn't matter who was watching. It didn't matter what they would think. It didn't matter any of the complications that awaited them afterward. All that mattered was that moment, that look, that connection pulsing between them like a living thing. When the music ended, Ryan didn't let her go immediately. Instead, he leaned in and whispered, "I need to show you something. Come with me." Mia nodded, allowing herself to be guided through the crowd to an outdoor balcony overlooking the illuminated city. The cool night air was a welcome relief after the heat of the salon, and Mia took a deep breath, trying to organize the whirlwind of emotions threatening to overflow her. Ryan stood beside her, his hands resting on the railing, his face turned towards the starry sky. "I brought you here today under the pretense of a deal," he began, his voice low but firm. "But this hasn't been about the deal for a long time. Maybe it never was." He turned to face her, and Mia saw raw vulnerability in his expression. "You reminded me what it's like to feel something real, what it's like to want to wake up in the morning because I know I'll see you, what it's like to have someone who truly sees me, not the version I show the world, but who I really am." With all my flaws and fears, Mia felt tears prick at her eyes, but she didn't hold them back. "Ryan," I started, but he gently shook his head. "Let me finish. I know all of this is complicated. I know it started the wrong way, but I can't regret it because if I hadn't made that ridiculous proposal, I would have never discovered what was right in front of me all this time." He took her hands in his, and Mia felt the warmth of that touch radiate throughout her body. "You're not my housekeeper, Mia. You never were. Not really. You're the person who makes me laugh when I'm buried in work, who brews coffee too strong, but just the way I like it, who understands my silences and accepts my imperfections." Mia couldn't hold it in any longer. "I feel it, too." The words came out in an urgent whisper. "I try to convince myself that it's wrong, that we're too different. But the truth is, I've never felt so seen, so valued as I do with you. You don't treat me like I'm less for not having money or formal education. You treat me as an equal, as someone whose opinion matters." She paused, gathering courage for the rest. "And I fell in love with you in the process. I know it's crazy, I know it happened too fast, but it's true." The confession hung between them for an eternal moment. Then Ryan smiled, that genuine and devastating smile that transformed his entire face. "Thank God," he said, pulling her close, "because I fell in love with you too, and I was terrified of being alone in this." And then, finally, he kissed her. It was a soft kiss at first, almost hesitant, as if he were asking for permission. But when Mia responded by wrapping her arms around his neck, the kiss deepened, becoming urgent and necessary, carrying weeks of unresolved tension and repressed feelings. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, leaning against each other as if they needed support to avoid falling. "And now," Mia asked, her voice still trembling. Ryan gently brushed his thumb across her cheek, wiping away a tear that had escaped. "Now we figure this out together. No deals, no transactions, no defined roles, just you and me. Building something real." Mia smiled through her tears. "And what about the money? The $10,000? Ryan shook his head. "I already transferred it to your account this morning. This was never about you. Earning the money through work. You deserved it, regardless of anything else." Mia felt her chest tighten with the generosity of that gesture, with the trust he was showing. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for making me feel like I can be more than I ever thought I could be." Ryan pulled her back into his arms, and they stood there embraced under the stars, the city pulsing below them as they wrote the first chapter of something new. Inside the salon, the music continued to play. People kept dancing, unaware of the moment happening on the balcony. But for Mia and Ryan, the world had shrunk to that embrace, that silent promise that not everything that starts complicated is destined to end badly. When they returned inside, hand in hand, this time without hiding or pretending, Mia saw Lisa once more. But this time the ex-wife's gaze didn't affect her, because Mia was no longer the insecure housekeeper trying to belong to a world that wasn't hers. She was the woman Ryan had chosen, not out of obligation or deal, but because he valued her, he loved her. And as they danced for the last time that night, Mia looked into Ryan's eyes and saw her future reflected there. It wouldn't be easy. They would have challenges ahead, difficult conversations about how to make this work. But for the first time in a long time, Mia had hope. Hope that love could bridge any chasm, that two people from different worlds could create a new world that was just theirs. And when Ryan smiled at her, that smile that was only Mia knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice, not to accept the $10,000, but to open her heart to the possibility of something more, to believe that she deserved to be loved just as she was. And in that moment, under the golden lights of the salon, Mia Smith ceased to be just the girl from the countryside who cleaned houses. She became simply Mia, the beloved woman. That was more than enough.